Well, I mean, it happens to be my personal view, but it's also, you know, do people that are pro-life really have anybody to vote for? If it was just Mr. Rauner and Governor Quinn, no. So it does. I think it gives them somebody to vote for, you know, and that's not the official Libertarian Party stance. The fact of the matter is that it's a split issue amongst libertarians because it depends on when you believe life starts. And I take it from a science approach, not from any other. And I've not been able to, nobody's been able to provide me with any documentation that definitely says that life does not begin at conception. So I always have to err on the side of life, but I'm consistent. I take it from, you know, the unborn child all the way to in situations of the death penalty. I'm also adamantly against that. So, you know, if somebody were to present me something that says scientifically that no, this is not true, then I would entertain other thoughts, but nobody's been able to show me that. Pat Quinn.
And why do you think that?
Just watching polls, and personally, I mean, there's always something that you think about politically when you're running any kind of campaign. You always want to peak the day before election, and frankly, Mr. Rauner's polling several months ago, he peaked too early. One of the reasons I'm running is because I'm sick of the same old political cronyism, and these two gentlemen, anytime they get in a room and go back and forth, they don't talk about their qualities, they talk about the other person and their lack of credentials, or what they may have done that's completely unrelated years ago. And that's the direction that they're taking. It's almost as if they're both running on a campaign of I'm not the other guy. And I don't think that's fair for the voter. You know, I think voters should have somebody that they can vote for that's running for the state of Illinois. I've said it before, I'm not running against Governor Quinn, I'm not running against Mr. Rauner, I'm running for Illinois. And that's good for several reasons. One of them is this is a grassroots campaign. So we have to go out there, earn votes. We don't have the money behind us that, say, the governor does or Mr. Rauner does. So this is a grassroots movement. If we were to get elected, I would owe no special interest groups anything. The only people I would owe would be the people of Illinois, and I think that's what you want in a politician. It's going to take a lot for me to have a bad election night. You know, there's three goals. The first one's to win, of course. The second one would be to get somewhere mid-double digits so that, you know, it builds momentum going on to the next next election season. Because if I get double digits, then obviously we're established party status, so we don't have to deal with this ballot access, as our campaigns can start earlier and we won't have this hurdle. And then the third thing would just be simply getting over the 5%, which would still give us the established party status, and more, you know, more libertarians would run. We would run people in every race that we possibly could, and we would be playing under the same rules for once. I ran for state legislator, and that's probably what did it. I mean, in 2010, I met Lex Green, who was that year's gubernatorial candidate, and I started talking with him, and a couple years after the campaign was over, the season was over, kind of didn't talk much, and then when I entertained the idea of running for state legislator, I called the Libertarian general, whatever general phone number I found online for candidate support, left a message, and then about a day or two later, Lex Green called me back. And I continued communicating with him and a couple other people in the party up until probably early 2013, when I got a phone call. Hey, Chad, how you doing? I said, well, I'm doing all right. A little bit of small talk, and then he goes, so, how would you think about running for governor? And I said no. and you know, I didn't really, I just said, no, you know, I don't think so. And he goes, well, just keep it in mind, you know. He goes, I remember when I went through this, and he gave me his story, how it was, he had to think about it. I go, all right, I'll think about it. And I thought about it, and by our next conversation, I said, I'll tell you what, I'll go to the convention, and I'll talk to some people at the convention, and if I'm nominated, I'll make the decision then. but I'm leaning toward it. He said, okay. I don't believe in any form of gun control, and as a matter of fact, I've been on the record talking about when I'm asked a lot of times about different ways that I would bring money to the state, I talk about examining the laws that are already on the books in regards to victimless crimes. Victimless crimes including people that are in prison for simply executing their Second Amendment right. Talk about people that are in prison for drug possession, things like that. And I've also been on the record saying I would examine it. I would pardon people that are in prison for nonviolent gun crimes. And the fact is what that would do is it would put an end to the debate here in Chicago. I mean, you mentioned it, how it's, you know, Chicago is probably the worst city in the country right now, if I'm not mistaken, as far as gun crimes and violence. And the fact of the matter is, it also has some of the most restrictive gun restrictive gun laws. So something's not working. And what would happen, at the end of the day, you have to be allowed to feel safe. That's the nature of the Second Amendment. You need to feel safe. You need to be able to protect yourself. And criminals by nature don't care. They're going to get their hands on guns. Look at the war on drugs. You know, drugs are illegal, but people still get their hands on them. Guns are illegal. If people that are hell-bent on committing a crime need a gun to achieve whatever crime they're trying to commit, they're going to get their hands on it. What's important is for the people that are walking the streets, that are living in the city, that they feel safe. And the criminal trying to execute whatever crime he wants to is going to think twice when he doesn't know if somebody's armed. We've seen that happen time and time again in other states that are more gun-friendly. No, I don't think in a moral society it's right to dictate what somebody does in the privacy of their own home, so long as they harm no other person and so long as they harm no other person's private property. You know, that's where the line should be drawn in regards to laws. So if somebody it gets caught with some type of drugs in their home, then that shouldn't be a crime. First off, drug abuse as a whole is a medical condition. That's the way it's classified. It's classified as a disease. So why are we treating them as criminals? We should be treating them as patients. That's correct. And you know, the debate about minimum wage, here's the thing. I understand running for office, you have to talk in sound bites a lot, and the minimum wage, if you say you're against it and that's all you get, all of a sudden it sounds like, wait, you don't want people to make money, and that's not true. I want to make a business-friendly environment. If you have an idea, I'll explain it like this: if you're making $10 an hour, let's pretend that $10 an hour is the minimum wage, so you're making $10 an hour, you're working for minimum wage. If somebody that's making or if they were to bump the minimum wage to $13 an hour all of a sudden, you would only feel like you have more money for about a couple of weeks until the market adjusts, and then your buying power would be the same. That person that worked his way from 10 to 13 enjoyed the buying power of somebody that made a few dollars more than minimum wage. Now all of a sudden he's right back to square one. So it feels good, but it doesn't increase your buying power, because at the end of the day, the wage that a business pays their employees is what dictates the price of a good or a service once they bring it to market. If the minimum wage goes up, prices are going to go up. It goes to the same thing. I hold the same stance on corporate taxation. You know, corporate taxation is simply rolled into the cost of the good or service, and the consumer winds up paying it, artificially inflating the cost of everything. Well, this is another way that I differ from the other two candidates, is where they have a tendency to want to kick the can down the road until they're out of office, and then all of a sudden it's the next General Assembly's problem. You know, it's $131 billion out of a $271 billion debt that the state has is on one program. Anybody in their personal life, if they had one drain on their life that was taking up that much of their money that they weren't really getting anything for, and it was a constant problem, you would have to eliminate that, and it needs to be eliminated. And I understand the Supreme Court ruling, and I totally understand that. It's contract law. If you're on it, if you're receiving a pension, or if you're working and you don't want to opt out of it, then that has to be respected. Contract law has to be respected. But especially with legislators throwing around terms like bankruptcy all the time and things like that, I think it would be an attractive policy to have an opt-out system where you could opt out of your pension. You would get everything returned back to you in the form of a tax credit, or everything that you put into it, and you can invest it in whichever way that you see fit. Also, a lot of, especially in regards to the state police, they would have more money to save on top of the money that they get back, because most of them, or all of them actually, 12% of their paycheck they don't even see from the day that they start in the force. So they would feel as if they were making more money, they could invest it. And I mean, at the end of the day, everybody in the private sector takes care of their own retirement anyway, and especially on a system that's so wishy-washy, I know it would be attractive to people in the middle of their careers, probably in the beginning of their careers. Yeah, I understand if you're within a few years of retirement, you might not want to deal with it, and you would want to keep that, and that's okay. And that'll work, but then you stop issuing it to new state employees. You pay them their full salary, and they do with it as it wants. I would entertain some type of 401k idea, you know, but ultimately, it's their money. They should keep it and invest it however they see fit.